Hey guys, I'm really excited to present to you the fourth in the series of Hermetic principles in the workshops that I've been running on Hermetic wisdom or Hermeticism, as it were. And although this is the fourth and some would say the final workshop of the four that I intended to run, it's actually just the beginning. And it's the beginning in the sense that if you go back to the first workshop and we looked at the principle of the square, the first principles of the square were based around the earthly four elements. And you would have noticed as you went through these other three workshops that we also address those elements within the teachings as well. So we started with a square, which represented the earth element. We went to the sphere in the second workshop, which is really about flow and about the water element and the female aspect. And then we went to the triangle in the last one, which is really about unconscious manifestation, and that was related to the fire element. So if you look at the principles of Hermes Trismegistus, the second principle, the law of correspondence, as above, so below. So just as we start this workshop in its finality of looking at those four principles and four elements, or four elements, so to speak, it's actually just the foundation, again, of higher learning. So again, we repeat that cycle, if you like. So going from the square to the circle to the triangle to the larger circle and then to the ether, we're actually going around in that cycle as the snake swallows its tail, but it's not so much a circle as it is a spiral, as we also came across in some of the previous workshops. So very excited to present you with this. Its principle focuses around conscious manifestation. The last workshop of the fire element or the triangle was around unconscious manifestation or wishing. So this one is more about focusing that intention. And that was brought forward in the focusing of the fire element and the intention as intention in a toroidal sense towards manifestation, which is where it manifests within the circle and then out into the ether and then back into the material. So again, going that cycle. So without further ado, let's get into it. So okay, so as I said before, this workshop 4 is looking at the large circle. Now just to see where that fits in the scheme of things, the large circle of course relates to the circle around the triangle. We've had the smaller circle, which is related to the female aspect and the water element. And within the image there of Hermes pointing out the philosopher's stone, the large circle is what encapsulates that. So also in respect to the Gordon tool, and we looked at this in quite a bit of detail, the Gordon tool representing the four elements, the fifth element being ether and the jewel at the top. The fourth element represents the half moon or the moon, the half that we can see. So the moon's related to the subconscious, the unconscious, and that's where the magic really happens. So it surrounds the triangle. It's related principally to the air element. Now it's interesting to play on people's words. Sometimes when people talk about the air element within the elements, they call it the wind element. I prefer to call it the air element because wind is more of a manifestation of air. So we think of wind more as when something's blowing. If it's still, we wouldn't call that the wind element because essentially there's no wind involved in that. And the wind element actually has a aspect of fire in it as well because of the power or the intention of that. So they all go together, of course. So it's not that we're ignoring those other elements. Now it represents the half moon, as I said before, on the Gordon toll, and the subconscious, and the conscious too. So in the philosopher's stone or the principle of alchemy, you can think of it as the crucible. So underneath that, you've got the mixing of the elements of the earth and the water, or you can think of it as the three elements of the table of elements that relate to solids, liquids, and gases. And then the last one is the subatomic potential, which is the fire element. So these things all coming together makes up the elements that we put inside the crucible, which is quite common to mix up in regards to the alchemist. So it's the mixing together of all of these elements to bring about manifestation. Now, it's also related to the intellect, to the mind. And the first principle, a hermetic principle, is that everything is mind, all is mental. And so everything comes from the mind. So When we manifest something, the first thing that we do is we visualize, we think of it, or it comes to us as an inspiration or an idea. So it starts as an idea here in the third eye. Um, Also, in relationship to the brain. Now, the brain shouldn't just be thought of as just this blob of glutinous material that sits in our head. It's actually got a lot more significance than that. There are massive amount of components to the brain as well, not just the left and the right cortexes, but also you've got a lot of other things in there. The frontal lobe, the rear, the medulla oblongata, all these different things are all related to that brain. So the brain actually has a lot of neurons in there, and those neurons are firing all the time as we are thinking, as we're remembering. You can think of it a bit like a computer's a representation of that brain as well, in the sense that not only are those neurons firing and helping our central nervous system, but from a connection principle of the universe, they are actually also in harmony with various aspects, including at the higher levels, what we would call the Akashic. So this is tapping into all of the knowledge at a higher level. So that's relating to the brain. So it's not just a piece of meat. So we talk about the alchemist crucible. We talk about the fields as well within the mind. So here's an interesting representation of a torus. We have two toruses, one around the heart center and then one around the whole body. So a toroidal field, if you like. So there's toroidal fields relating to the electromagnetic field around us. That was interesting. I was watching something just the other day where someone had said, someone who'd studied a lot of alchemy had said, if you hear someone talking about toruses or toroidal fields and vortexes, you need to stand up and listen, or sit up and listen. And this is what we talk about here, and that's not big noting myself. This is just the path that this has taken me down that I hope to give you some insights into. So those fields are all related to that intellect and that mind. And actually around that circle, the inner side of that circle is about the mind, or the intellect, and the outer part of that circle is the connection. So there's an inner and an outer aspect to it. And you could think of that as the brain and the mind, or the physical brain and the metaphysical mind. Now, what happens is whenever we think of anything, we actually create a field, and that field is called a thought form. And all the time when we're thinking, we're actually putting together these thought forms. So whether you're thinking about, a day you're going to have at work, or whether you're thinking about a person, or whether you're thinking about a material object, anything like that creates that thought form. That thought form is related to a field, and that field is related to form. So everything, as I said at the very beginning, everything that has form has a field. So as you create that field in your head, or that thought form, which is thought as in field, and form, which is a physical form, it actually attracts through the law of attraction whatever it may be that you're actually trying to manifest. So when you consciously create that field in your head, or that thought form in your mind, in your mind's eye, and then you project that out, what it does is it encapsulates that particular field. It goes out, it finds correlation and coincidence with what it needs to manifest, and coincidentally you have this idea of it creating form in its own right. So that's the principle of manifestation in a nutshell, so to speak. So thought forms are really important. Now the idea of projection. Now this is an interesting graphic that I came across, and I just sort of superimposed the car in there. But in essence, if you actually look at on the left hand side, you've got this projector inside your head. So that projector is the visualization of that car, in this example, to manifest a nice sports car, and anything's possible. There is unlimited potential out there, and infinite potential. You've just got to unlock it. So you have the square or the rectangle there, which is representing where that car starts as that thought. So that's, again, if you consider it to the golden toe, or the principles of hermeticism, this is the square. You then have the lens, which is turned side on there, but that would be a circle. So there's your water element. There is your circle. So you've got your square and your circle. So you're bringing that into focus, so to speak. And to help with that, you're bringing in the fire element, and you're focusing that at the point of your third eye, where it's actually that image is in complete focus. And then from there, you're projecting it out. So again, out through your side, out through that fourth element, which is actually the air element. So you're projecting it out there, and it'll come back and manifest. Now, some of the myths around things such as psychic abilities, and there's been a lot of I wouldn't say negativity, but mystery around it and occultism around these psychic abilities. And mainstream science has always said that that no one can prove that there are these psychic abilities. Well, that's because they want to try and fit you into a box. Now, science works that way, where everything has to be proven based on scientific fact. But ironically, science is flawed in a lot of ways. So, for example, all the constants of science are not actually constants, they fluctuate. So, for example, the speed of light has probably changed in what science thinks the actual speed of light is multiple times throughout history. And it's got to the point where no one can agree on the speed of light. So, scientists have just said, okay, we'll just call this the constant, even though it's not necessarily set in stone. So, when science is trying to prove something that's maybe metaphysical or like psychic, they're trying to gauge it against a constant that is not even a constant. For example, I heard recently of an experiment where um, the influence of photons in a box was very interesting. So what they did is create a vacuum, and they had photons in this box that they were measuring, and these photons are photons of light. And they noticed that when someone actually put their attention on these photons started behaving in a different way. They took their attention away, and the photons became very random. What they then thought they would try and do is fool the photons by actually taking a video camera, putting it on the box, putting the person in another room where they couldn't see the box, and then the person, every time they watched the screen, they actually did exactly the same thing as if they were present in the room. So interestingly, that idea of attention or focus, doesn't matter where you are, that'll still influence that light, in that case the photons. So that idea of psychic abilities, if you think about, here's another example. My daughter was doing a degree in cancer treatment, and she had a petri dish inside a lab, supposedly inside an enclosed area where there was no influence from anything else physically, and she wasn't getting very good results. Now, if you extrapolate what I just said in regards to people's influence, if you've got the cleaner walks in there and is walking around with a vacuum cleaner, had a bit of a bad day, is cussing and moaning and complaining, or vice versa, their auric field is actually saturating everything within that room. So those cells that she was trying to germinate, or whatever she was doing with them, would be influenced by anything. It could even be influenced by her sitting at home hoping that they'll come out in a certain outcome. So we're all connected. The point is that everything is connected. When you look at two objects and you think there's space between those two objects, well, there's not. Even the fact that nitrogen and oxygen make up the soup that we sort of live in, and that psychic soup, or that source field, it's all connected. There is no time and space. It's just the way we perceive it. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So that's really important in regards to psychic abilities. Now, just sort of digressed a bit there, but in relation to some of the extrasensory perceptions, the important thing about developing these particular psychic abilities is in the idea of attunement. So just as in a radio where you want to tune it to a certain station, you have to turn the dial until you actually get onto the right frequency. So that's really important, that you actually you have to be in the right mindset. Now, one of the things that I hope, even just being exposed to all this information, is that you've changed your level of attunement to things that are out there. And with an open mind, you can do that. So, for example, on the very first workshop, I mentioned about giants. If you closed your mind off and just said, no, that's a load of rubbish, there's no such thing as giants out there, without looking at the evidence and engaging that for yourselves. And again, I'm only presenting it as a finger pointing to the moon. It's important that you do your own study in that. But a lot of people who have done in-depth studies have come back and said, well, here's all the proof, here's all the evidence, here's the bibliographies on different books that are saying the same thing. And in this case here, you've got the Bible, which is followed by millions of Christians around the world. So, it's one of those things that if you said to someone, do you think that giants exist, especially in the Christian and Catholic world, um, if they denied it, you'd say, well, you follow a Bible that actually has that information in it. So hopefully going through all this exposure to knowledge and consuming this knowledge, it opens you up more so that you don't become so focused and locked into a certain way. You actually spread out. So you start not only seeing more, but also attuning more to the subtle things out there. And this is probably where the next point is sensitivity. So we start feeling, we realize for a start that um, you need you need sensitivity to these things. These are subtle energies. They're not coarse energies. The coarse energies are the physical things, the physical form that we have and that is around us. Even then, they're not that physical, but um, from our perspective, they are actually solid. Whereas what we're dealing with is something that's a lot more subtle. So to gain that sensitivity, you have to turn down the noise. You have to attune yourself to the right frequencies to be able to pick up on things. You have to keep the noise down and keep things quieter so that you can actually pick up. And that's quieter, not just in the sense of hearing, it's all your senses, but also quieter in the sense of touch, and stuff like that. So, you know, cutting out the noise, cutting out all that extraneous noise. So sensitivity is really important in that, and that's the way that you can move into people's vibrations, and you can do clairaudience and clairvoyance and those sorts of things. Now, another psychic ability would be astral projection. So we live on the third dimension, if you like. So the next dimension up from this is called the astral plane, and when you have vivid dreams, whenever you dream, actually, you're plugging into the astral realm. So you're plugging into the fourth dimension. It's a dimension where we don't necessarily see, but that's what you're seeing and experiencing when you have dreams. That's where your dream interpretation comes into play, where you're actually immersing yourself within all of your thought forms and thoughts. And this is why sometimes dreams are so symbolic, is that it's something that's sitting in your subconscious that when you go to sleep and when you dream, you're actually visiting that. And as you would have experienced, some of these dreams are so lifelike and so real that you wake up feeling emotional about things. That was a bad dream or that was a good dream, happy dream, sad dream. So it's just as real as being in this third dimension of reality. So astral projection is where you can consciously, or you unconsciously even, move your body out and to traverse through that astral plane. Normally you'll see there also in the graphic that we're held to our physical body by what's called the silver cord. So if that silver cord gets severed, normally it means that we've moved away from our physical body and we're now moving back into another state of reincarnation. Now, another psychic ability would be clairvoyance. Again, turning the attunement dial to certain things and allowing yourself to pick up on those subtle voices, subtle symbols. A lot of people, when they're clairvoyant, they're actually picking up on the symbols rather than actually, hearing someone say something. They might hear some words, they might get some visions, but mostly it's visual. So they'll get messages through that visual thing. It might be through geometry, seeing geometric shapes, could be any number of things. But ultimately, clairvoyance is about that clear, if you like, clairvoyance. Voyance meaning a voyage, clear meaning a clear voyage into another dimension. That's also relating to things like shamanism, where shamans who commonly known in the West as witch doctors, they actually could bring themselves into states of consciousness and traverse through into other levels and other dimensions to help people with their healing. So that's another aspect of that. Telepathy is an interesting one. So telepathy is about, again, getting on the same wavelength with someone else or another being. It could be that telepathy in the sense of talking to other animals, could be talking to other beings. We had these skills and abilities a long time ago, but a lot of them were shut down. But now, at this point in time, as we're moving through the age of Aquarius, we're starting to bring all those skills and abilities, those psychic abilities, back into play. And that's also an idea of everyone starting to raise their level of consciousness, is starting to bring that energy back. It's no coincidence, or sorry, it should be. It is a coincidence that although we only use 12% of our brain, there is that, and the DNA, as I said before, the junk DNA, that this is now starting to open us up, and our DNA strands are opening us up to higher levels of consciousness. And this happens naturally. People who've been together for a long time always sort of talk about people who've got, been married for a long time. They live in the same space. They start talking like each other, sure. But in the telepathic sense, they might think, oh, what am I going to I'd feel like some fish for dinner. And then you come home and your wife or your partner is cooking fish. Or I feel like doing this. Oh, that's a good idea. I was just thinking about that. So we naturally actually have this telepathic connection with other people, and that's normally because, like, we are tuning each other to the same wavelength. We both like the same things, so we have certain common ground, and when that common ground is of the same thing, like you might both like fish, for example, so you both attune yourself to that. So telepathy is quite common. It's not something super mystical. Another skill for psychic abilities is pyrokinesis, and that really is the focusing of the fire element. Here's a little girl here, and you can see a video of her. She's actually causing something to catch fire. A lot of healers, especially people like who do qigong, Chinese medicine, they actually have that ability. And if you look it up on the internet, again, there's a lot more coming out on YouTube now. A lot of people would say, that's fake and that's just, but these people have got no vested interest in faking things. So pyrokinesis is another psychic ability that enables you to do certain things. And now I mention in my workshops about various things that have happened in my life. For example, I was driving down the road, and I used to work in the petroleum industry, and I drove past this service station in Taupo that I never used to like going there. It seemed pretty dark, and I even made the comment that maybe a lot of these mobile stations are built on Maori land, or land that's been confiscated. And it was interesting that some of them actually had. But anyway, this service station, as I went past, I said, "Oh, I hate that service station. I wish it just burned down." And then lo and behold, a couple of hours later, I get a call from one of my colleagues saying, when you come back, you need to go through Taupo because that service station that I'd just gone past had actually caught on fire. So interesting about that. Now, another skill is telekinesis. So that's the ability to influence physical things. Another story about that, a personal experience you can't substitute and you can't take away from me and say it didn't happen, because it did. Again, round Taupo, pulled into another service station, BP Wairaki. Used to be a really good service station run by good people, and then BP took it back because they got greedy. People standing there while I'm filling my vehicle on the forecourt and just watching me rather than coming out and helping like they used to. And I sort of just thought to myself, those people need a bit of a shake-up. And within a couple of seconds, the whole forecourt started shaking. And to cut a long story short, no one else felt the earthquake from other people around the country that I spoke to subsequently after that, that I knew from Martin and from just up the road. And when I looked on GeoNet, the earthquake was actually directly below the service station, 18 kilometers down. Now, that wasn't conscious telekinesis, but it was influencing the material. Now, I will say that doing martial arts for a long time and dealing especially with the focus of these elements, earth, air, water, fire, you are assimilating with those particular elemental beings and those elements, and therefore you do have that potential to actually work with them. It was always said that the ninja that lived in the mountain could harness those elemental forces, those gods, to help them do their work. So proof's in the pudding, I suppose, if you consider those sorts of events of happening. Now, interesting here, another psychic ability, levitation. And this gentleman here is Ed Letterskillen, EDL, or Ed L. He built something called the Coral Castle back in, I think it was the 60s, and there's him standing inside this garden that they called the Coral Castle. And you can see some quite large rocks there. They're actually coral formations, rock formations. Anyway, the story went that he actually ordered some rocks. This guy's truck driver turned up, and there were these big boulders on the back of his truck, and he said, "Well, where's your crane? How are you going to get these things off?" And basically, Ed just said to him, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll sort it out. Go and have a cup of tea." This guy went away, came back, the truck was empty. He sort of looked around, and he didn't ask him how he got them off, but it turned out that a couple of young boys had actually been watching as the truck turned up and seen him unloading the truck. And he actually had these two pine cone like things in his hand, and he was actually levitating and moving these rocks into position. And one of them he positioned was a large plinth on top of an opening. And they attested to the fact that they'd seen him do this. So very interesting. Another thing with levitation, someone who traveled through through Tibet. There's quite a lot of mysticism in Tibet. You know, there's talk of footprints on ceilings, people walking through walls, people levitating, those sorts of things. And this guy witnessed going to this sort of ritual where there were all these monks around with these big horns, you know, the big long ones blowing, and they were all focusing on this big boulder in the center. Some of them were doing mantra, some of them bells. They were all sort of making this frequency. Next thing he saw this boulder just raise up by itself and then end up on top of this cliff top, and they positioned it just through the idea of intention and levitation. So, and sound frequency. So it's already been proven that you can actually levitate objects through sound frequency. So yeah, so that idea of levitation also gives light to how they actually built the pyramids, where they levitated the boulders using a resonance that resonated with the same frequency as the actual blocks they were moving. And those blocks were actually, most of them were quartz, so it was quite easy to affect the crystals within those. So again, in regards to ancient magicians, now this is interesting. This is a quote from Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So when you think about if I had a phone and I was talking to somebody on another part of the planet or wherever, if a native, someone who'd never seen a mobile phone before, and we're talking to each other, he could consider that's magic. It'd be like telepathy, because he can't see the wires, he can't see anything, so he would think that's magic. Now, interestingly, if you ever see a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy, a Coke bottle fell out of the sky. They'd never seen a Coke bottle before, and they worshipped it as coming from the gods, and they never knew that it had actually just been thrown out of a plane. Quite an interesting take on that, but it's sort of alluded to the point that, you know, things that just appear that we consider magic, there may be some very rational, logical explanation for it, or maybe that's just something that we haven't actually come across in our technology yet. So the ancient magicians were people like the gods. I mean, here's Zeus. Zeus used to have a lightning bolt in his hand, and he would throw that lightning bolt down on, you know, whatever he needed to change, or if he got angry. Jesus, I mean, here's Jesus walking on water. You know, you could consider him a magician. Now, someone once asked me, you know, who was Jesus? And just putting it out there, my understanding was he was a 11th dimensional Arcturian descended master. So Arcturians were a race from another part of the solar, or part of the galaxy, and they had the ability to do magic things. And obviously, some of the practices that he did would be certainly considered magic even in his day. So yeah, a magician that, you know, people would say, well, turned wine into water, made bread out of manna, walked on water. Now here's an interesting one. This is Dynamo. So Dynamo's a modern magician, and in this case here, he's actually walking across the Thames. Now, is that real or is it a trick? I'll leave that up to you. I mean, if you watch it and you use your rational mind to actually try and figure out how he's done it in a large body of water, and boats are going by him and canoeists and all sorts of things, you could say it's staged. But if you have the right intention and you have the right energy and you have the right understanding of the way nature works, anything's possible. I'll leave it at that. Merlin, very popular magician, especially in King Arthur's day. And he was said to have moved Stonehenge along a ley line from, I think it was Salisbury, plains of Salisbury, to where it is now. So, and they used to call on Merlin to help in situations. King Solomon is another one. So King Solomon was a king of the Jews way back, and he's very much the focus of modern day Freemasonry. So yeah, King Solomon had a temple, and in that temple was all built around sacred geometry and magic. Some of the magic arts, witchcraft. Again, you got to be careful with that sort of connotation because everyone, um, not so much these days, but in the days of the Inquisition, anyone who was a witch was burnt at the stake, and there were millions of witches during the Inquisition, supposed witches. If you were a herbalist in those days, as a naturopath, you would have been considered a witch back then, mixing up magic potions and things like that. So, but that is witchcraft or Wicca. Wizardry, male witches, if you like, or male wizards. Again, we talk about Merlin being a magician, but also a wizard. Alchemy is another one of the magic arts that we talk about. So that is the idea of turning um, base metals like lead into gold. But again, that's a metaphor. I wouldn't take that as being how would you say, literal. Although even science now can actually make gold out of different elements. But thinking in mind that, when we looked back on one of the workshops, the only difference between gold and lead was had 93 electrons and protons, and gold had something like 87 or 89. So there's only about three or four atoms, uh, three or four particles that were the difference between each of those different elements. So it wasn't huge. So it's just a matter of changing those alchemic features. Religion, again, is could be considered a magic art. And if you look at some of the goings on when you're watching a mass, for example, in a Catholic church, not that I go to church anytime other than weddings and funerals, or even some of the more up-to-date spiritual churches, they actually are holding their hands up like this and channeling and doing all sorts of things. It's quite interesting. So, of course, if you're not doing it with any form of intention, the power is pretty moot. Divination is another one of the magic arts. So that's actually about things like palmistry, tarot card reading, the I Ching, using the yarrow stalks or the coins to depict what's happening at the present day and what's happening in the future. So, for example, the tarot is really about providing a framework from which you can really nail down different aspects. So, for example, I use the Celtic cross. So the cross represents what's crossing the influences, the powers above, the powers below, the powers from behind, and the powers moving forward, or the influences moving forward, and the history of those and influences around that. So it gives you a good framework to be able to divine things, or to read the future and the past. Another magic art could be considered Freemasonry. There's a lot of practices within there in regards to the use of sacred geometry, the square and the compass. Of course, the compass makes a circle, so a square and a compass is the first two elements that we looked at in regards to earth and water. And the compass in the shape of the triangle is actually representative of the fire element and the influencing or the doing of that encapsulated within the circle. So again, magic art such as that. Now, the other thing about practical magic is spells. So spelling, when you actually write something, you are actually spelling out something. You are creating a spell. This goes back to ancient times when writing was all about casting spells. And in this case here, you've got a commitment spell. It's a bit like why, for example, you would do your wedding vows within a group of people all focusing on you in your wedding, to give that power to your relationship. So you would come across with your vows. You would vow, so you would seal that particular vow. So again, it's like a spell. You're sealing that vow and sealing your relationship. So magic spells. Now, in the church, for example, here's some different examples in religion. So you have the laying on of hands, or the projection of light in the top one. You've got the charging of the chalice or the cup. Now, interesting there, if you look at the Holy Grail and you look at a toroidal field, you've got the Grail at the top, and then you've got the base at the bottom, and in between you've got this torus. So again, you've got this idea of a toroidal field, and you're having the chalice here, which can also be representative, as we said before, of the crucible. So within that, you're charging whatever it is. In this case here, it might be charging the wine, or the Eucharist, I think they call it within the Catholic Church. Even here, the Dalai Lama, you would give him something and he would touch it and then put it back around your neck. So he's charging that particular scarf. And you see this all the time when he travels and people have scarves and he just grabs them and then puts them back. Thank you, thank you. So he's actually blessing that that item with his energy. Another aspect of practical magic might be the runes. Now the runes go back thousands of years, and the runes are predominantly more Nordic. So in the case of here, you've got, say for example, the first letter there, so they also form an alphabet. So where you've got the first one there, which is actually looking like that with the two hands, I'm just trying to get on the camera, Fehu, for example. Fehu represents wealth. So it actually represents the horns of a cow. So cattle in the old days were considered a status symbol and a symbol of your wealth. So you might emulate that particular stand that way. They call it a stotter, which is like a stance. You would stand that way to tap into those runic streams that they each of those are perpetuated with. So everyone that had wealth, had cattle, would emulate a certain energy, and you could tap into that energy, and consequently you could end up having cattle and cows and things like that. You might use a rune for magic, for example, for magic for protection. So in this case here, it might be a combination of different runes. So you would put those runes onto something. If you wanted to protect your house, if you wanted to protect your property, you could draw this, for example. Now, we talked before about the different relationships in regards to the goronto, or the elements. So in earth, for example, you've got the encapsulating. In water, you've got the attracting, like a whirlpool that draws stuff in. Earth would be in a box or in a cave, if you like, or encapsulated that way. And then you've got the fire element, which is related to the projection. So you're actually projecting that particular spell. So again, not just drawing that rune. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about when you, for example, if you looked at a pen and the ink in the pen, or an ink in a well, it has a certain vibration about it. So if you think of it like, say, a pen with a quill, the old days when you'd actually dip the quill in there and you'd scribe, or you'd write, you'd spell, that energy is sort of encapsulated within that particular ink. When you then take that and then put it onto a page, that ink is then, if you like, flowing in a certain direction. So it's maybe going backwards and forwards in a line. You start drawing a square, for example, and it's traveling around the square, and it's actually creating a field around that as well and inside it. So just by you doing that with ink and with the intention of the point of the quill, you're actually creating a certain field, if you like. So when you actually look at, say, for example, protection, you could use protection within one of those particular figures. Say, for example, you wanted to encapsulate protection. You wanted to keep the protection within your area, your house, your car, your vehicle. If you wanted to attract protection, you wanted to draw something in to help you with your protection, you would put it inside a sphere. Or if you wanted to direct protection to somewhere else, or the protection might be, for example, when I do my protection of a property, I actually project out. I don't use runes, I use symbols, and I would project out on the four corners so that everything would feel that projection and would not come close. So that's the idea of using that practical magic and encapsulating it. Now, another interesting thing that the Vikings and other races used to do is they would actually put the runes on things like swords, and you'll see that's quite common. Again, to achieve a certain desired result, it might be for greater protection. So they might put them on the front of their ships. so that they were protected as they traveled across the oceans. So runes have been used since time immemorial. Now, another thing in regards to practical magic would be incantations. Now, incantations is very similar to mantra and also to affirmations. So the more you do these mantra, the more you do the affirmation, the stronger the energy gets. You're building this energy. So, for example, I had a teacher once who had said, he wanted to have a good time. He wanted to go out and have a good time. It was a Saturday and he was bored, so he sat down and he reckons he had this affirmation, which is a friend's going to come around. We're going to go out and have a good time. A friend's going to come around. We're going to go out and have a good time. And he said, how long do you think I did that for? Just sitting there visualizing this friend coming around. I sort of said, well, my experience from unconscious manifestation was sort of once, but he said, no, conscious manifestation. He said he did it for about 2 hours, but lo and behold, a friend just popped in out of the blue and said, let's go out and have a few drinks. So there is the idea of mantra or affirmation. So really important there. Another one is magic potions. Again, as I said before, witches would have been considered, people like naturopaths who are mixing up these different tinctures would be considered magic potions, and therefore would change your inner state, which would then change your outer state. So the idea of practical magic and potions could be, what do you call it, where you herbology. So you actually have different tinctures to, like rescue remedy would be considered a magic potion. We know it's not in the sense of it's a herbal remedy, but it still comes under that that idea of practical magic. Now another one would be sigils. Sigils are quite common, and what they are magic symbols. A lot of sigils out there, and it's more or less encapsulating again that intent or that intention. So you can create your own sigils based on a sentence and taking out certain parts of the sentence, like all the vowels, leave the consonants. Any double consonants, just have a single consonant. So remove the second consonant. Put those together, and you actually have a sigil. So, for an example, part of my practical magic was I wanted to turn one of my novels into a movie, and everyone had said it would make a really good movie and all that sort of thing. So what I did was I actually took the words from I want to make my book into I want to make Black Dove into a movie. It was very specific. I took out all the vowels, took out the double consonants, and I put it into a single symbol, and that became a sigil. So I had all of my intention into that. Basically, what I did was I started by doing that. That was the physical sense. I charged it with emotion. So I thought, oh, this would be awesome, go to the premiere of my own movie and I would see myself helping to direct this movie and all that sort of thing. I then visualized that within the fire element, so seeing it within here, same way that you would with prayer. If you wanted to heal somebody or you wanted a certain outcome of prayer, you'd close your eyes, in your mind's eye you would put that into the triangle, so that would be the action and the focus towards that single point, and that would be the triangle. And then what I did is I actually burnt the sigil on the piece of paper so that the fire element compressed and then let it go with the smoke. So that was the air element. So I had all the elements building up to that manifestation. And then I think it was 6 days later, I received a text message from one of my old students from martial arts, I hadn't seen for about 20 years. And he said, hey, I've just been reading your novel, Black Dove. I've been working in the movie industry for 17 years. I think it would make a great movie. Would you mind if I wrote the manuscript for it or the screenplay for it? And that was from all that exercise. So this stuff works. The funny thing is that I watched a YouTube clip of how to do these sigils, and people going, really, really works. Initially, I was skeptical, healthily, and so I thought, well, what have I got to lose? I'll give it a go, and that's what happened. So yes, this stuff does work. You've just got to persevere. You've got to have the right intention, and you've got to realize that when you're doing conscious manifestation, there is the aspect of karma as well. So if you're going to project conscious manifestation, you want to do it in a good sense. You don't want to be doing anything negative. You want positive rewards, and you're not looking for those rewards, but you want positive outcomes for yourself, not negative ones. So, for example, if you wanted to put a curse on somebody, you could certainly do that, but you're through the law of interference and karma, you're going to reap that back yourself. So just be aware that you should only use magic for good things. Now, another thing is talismans. So this is another part of practical magic. Now this is called an amamori. We wear those. They're in our training. You can get these from Japan. You get them from Shinto shrines. Excuse me. And the priests have blessed them. They've put a um, piece of paper in there and they've written a magic spell, if you like, in there and sealed it. And you wear those on your person. So, for example, I bought one back from Japan, gave it to my daughter. It was one of a compass for safe travels, and she never got lost. Just a coincidence, maybe. But I wear these when I'm training to enhance my martial training, and I always feel that I'm missing something when I forget to put it on. So yeah, that's the idea of a talisman. Now they can be magic charms like rabbit's feet, four-leaf clover. They can be any number of things. We use these all the time. And people who play a lot of sports, they might have their favorite socks, their magic socks, or they might have their favorite hat or their favorite piece of jewelry, and they think that by wearing that it actually enhances their ability, and it's a positive spiral. If you put on, or you're wearing your magic rabbit's foot and you keep wearing it and you keep experiencing positivity, then that charges that positivity. Next time you put it on, you draw on that positivity and you build more positivity. It's a positive spiral. So yeah, talisman. Now in our Japanese teaching, we have what's called the kuji. So the kuji, we talked initially about mudra, which were hand gestures. Now, of course, this is the common one in Christianity is the prayer, but you might have other ones like this, which are more succinct. And we did this one in one of our other workshops, which is called Rin. Now, this is the first one of the Kuji Kiri or the Kuji In, and this builds strength. So it represents the Vajra or the Diamond Thunderbolt. So this is the Kuji, and you would do this with thought, word, Om Vajramanataya Swaha, the thought of being strong, and the deed, which is actually your hand signals. Now, this is the same, we looked at before with Johnny Wilkinson. Before he kicked a goal, he would always put his hands like this. This is Kuji as well. Fingers crossed. That's, keep your fingers crossed for good luck. Cross my heart and point to God. Hope to die, but tell a lie. Cross my soul, or something like that. This is going a little bit deeper into what we would call some of the Mikyo or the Mikyo magic. And it comes from Tibet and China and India. So, for example, here we would create a grid, Rin, Pyo, To, Sha, Kai, Jin, Ret, Zai, Zen, and then you would put a character on there depending on what it was that you wanted to project. So, use that quite often for protection. So, I'll put something on there, for example, to protect you. So, it's similar to writing on something. And you can also, I've used it for healing. So actually writing on a piece of paper, like we've said before, with the ink in certain configuration, and then putting a Japanese character or Chinese character on there that was for healing. Keeping in mind that the Chinese character is actually an anagram, so or a what do you call it? It's like a picture, a pictogram is what I'm looking for. So basically, you're doing more than just putting a bit of writing on there. You're putting a picture on there that might be of someone who's more healthy or healing, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And as I said, prayer. So prayer is actually a form of practical magic as well. Now, just because you're praying to somebody for healing, keep in mind that the universe still works in mysterious ways. So it might be that you've been praying for someone to get better. I think one of the things that we forget is that in reincarnation, which is really one of the foundational principles of this life, is that you might pray for someone to get better, and part of them getting better, or the point of them getting better, might be that it releases them from this particular life and all the hardship and pain and agony that they're going through. So never discredit or discount the power of prayer, in the sense that just because it doesn't achieve what you think it needs to achieve, which may be, excuse me for the inference, a bit selfish for us to try and prolong somebody's life when they need to pass over, um, by praying for them Godspeed, if you like, is probably a way of actually alleviating that pain for them. So yeah, we're looking at that idea of attunement. Now this exercise here is in relation to tuning in, cutting down the noise, and feeling intention. So what we would be doing in this exercise is, and obviously we can't do it on video, what we did in the practical sense is, if you sit down and two of you, it requires both of you to do it. This is also good for both as well. So one is practicing in their power of intention, the other one's practicing their sensitivity. So you basically, one person sits down, clears their mind, imagines themselves floating in a bubble. So clear your mind, and then you're floating in this bubble so that you're nice and light. That's the air element. It's also the circle. And then get you to stand up. And then the other person will project their intention, and their intention is to touch you on the shoulder. So you stand about 3 or 4 feet away from each other. You've got your back to the person if you're the one who's receiving. And what you do is you just let yourself float there, nice and light. And then as the person projects that intention, just if you feel the urge, just feel yourself step forward as if someone's touching you on the shoulder. Now this is the same or similar to if you're walking down the street and you all of a sudden feel something behind you and you look around and there's someone looking straight at you. It's the same sort of idea. So the other thing is, the person who's actually projecting the intention, it's important for them that they understand that the projection they're doing is not necessarily, it should be tied in with your physicality. So for example, if you're thinking about putting your hand on their shoulder, they might move as well, so without you even doing the other part. So try and don't think of touching them on the shoulder, which is a challenge to you in yourself, and controlling that intention and that thought. And then lift your hand up and then see it project out, see the energy project out onto that shoulder. Okay, so and the other person just feeling that. Now it's really important that you do this, I won't say correctly, but you do it with a great degree of discernment. The reason being is that it's not something to play around with, because if you're trying to trick somebody and they're trying to build up their sensitivity or they build up their spirituality, it's not a time to play tricks on them, because you could basically ruin their ability to attune themselves and to evolve by giving them the wrong signals. So always make sure that you're doing this with, although it's light-hearted, make sure that you're doing it with the right intention. Okay, that's really important. Now, once you start practicing that and become proficient at that, and you're getting good results, there's a couple of other things you can do. One of them is to have them move further away from you. Now, if you're in a long corridor or in a hall, get them at halfway down the hall and then do it again. And notice that it doesn't make any difference. Now, I said before, there is no difference in time and space in respect of that. So you can project no matter whether they're really close by or whether they're really far away. And they may be on the other side of the world and you're projecting that intention. So that's one thing. The other thing that you can do is then start trying to focus your intention by trying to touch them on one of their shoulders and get them to move. So they might feel that it's on the right shoulder this time, or the left shoulder. So get them to put up their hand or just step forward on left foot or right foot, depending on which side you're touching them on, or projecting that touch to. So that's an idea of an exercise in sensitivity. Now, the other exercise that we did in the practical workshops was called psychometry. Now, when I'm teaching psychometry, it's normally like a 4-day course, and the idea is that when you're into your quiet, into your meditation, is actually taking stock. You don't have to be completely balanced. There's a misnomer actually in spiritual development that you should balance your emotions at all times, and keep those balanced. it's emotions that make the world go round. So you need those emotions. So it's not about always being balanced, but there are times when you can bring yourself into that balance, and other times where you can project that emotion to help that outcome better. So in this case here, you want to take stock. You might be feeling nervous. You might have a feeling up here. You might be sore in the legs, any number of those things. But you want to take stock basically of what you feel like at this point in time. The other person sitting there observing, you might have a second observer. And basically what you do is write down a name on a piece of paper. Person holds that in their hand or gives that to you. You take stock, and then you say, as you grab the piece of paper, I'm going to move into the vibration of the person whose name is on this piece of paper. And then you start walking, and you'll notice things like, or start iterating stuff like, I'm walking in a certain way, I'm looking up, I'm looking down, I'm looking around. You might walk differently than your normal walk. You might feel differently straight away. So then you get the person to ask you some questions that they know the answers to, so you're validating. So it might be, what does this person think about the current prime minister, for example, and you know that they like them or they don't like them or whatever. And then you might change your walk straight away. It's like, oh, and you stop. Or it might be that you look down, or it might be that you start laughing, or it might be that you start feeling angry or happy or sad or any number of those things. So again, it's that change from that baseline. So iterating that. So I don't feel very happy about this person. I feel very happy about this person. And you can go on to ask different questions as long as you're validating them, and then you can give the person an accuracy of, well, that was really accurate. I had someone the other day who said, what does this person think about potatoes? I said, well, they can take them or leave them, or they're not fussed with them. I said, but they like chips, and this person said, that's exactly right. That's the only potatoes they eat is chips. So that's a validation. So again, that's the idea of psychometry, and again, it's about quietening the mind. It's about tuning in. It's about picking up those subtle vibrations and reflecting those. Now, at the end of the session, make sure that as you've received with your left, because you remember your left is your female aspect, controlled by the right side of the brain, and your right is your left is, or your right is your left side of the brain, which is the male aspect, which is about projecting. So once you've finished your reading, take the paper in the right hand, give it back to the person and say, I now remove the vibration of this person on the piece of paper, whose name is on this piece of paper, and then feel it leave. That's really important. Otherwise, you'll wear that person's vibration throughout the day. Now, it's funny, just a story before I finish. We had a TV crew come to one of our ninja sessions in Sydney years and years ago when I first started, and this guy didn't have any footwear, the specific tabi that we wear, which some people call ninja boots. So I lent him mine. Now, the energy centers for our body are actually the palms of the hands and the soles of our feet and our face. So he was wearing them obviously on his feet, and as he took them off, and we were going to do some training afterwards, and I put them back on, my feet were like all over the show. They were at 6s and 7s. Like I couldn't walk, I couldn't train properly, and I'd picked up on his vibration because he'd saturated these with his vibration. Now, to remove those vibrations and to cleanse things, it's elemental. So I didn't go and wash them. I took them home and washed them. I didn't have the opportunity right there and then. I took them off and just wore bare feet. But you've got the 4 elements. So again, if you want to earth something, bury it in the earth. It'll remove the vibration. If you want to remove the vibration through water, wash, immerse in water, see the vibration flow out. If you want to remove the vibration, you could burn it through fire or activity, or heat it. This is the idea of, why you put things in an autoclave or to cleanse them, or you could visualize that cleansing. Okay, so these different ways, and again, you could use that in a visual sense. So, say for example, you wanted to clean a room. What you could do is actually visualize water flowing through the room and washing out any negative thought forms. Okay, or you could imagine the fire burning up. Don't set your house on fire or service station, but visualize all of that with light. So, for example, if you've got thought forms that people have created in your house and your environment, and you want to remove those, you can visualize like shooting them with a laser beam or with a ray of light. So you can do that, or you might visualize a air blowing them through the building, or them returning to Earth. So those different ways of actually removing those negative vibrations. Okay. So thanks very much for watching, and I hope that you got something out of that. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side.